Starting now. Okay, so what I thought we'd talk about tonight is this rise of these new black relationship experts, but a bigger topic has to be around this idea of black marriage. I think that most people would agree that the path to a strong race is the black family, and of course, our history as black folk has been marriage, and this history was, really for, you could argue, a full century, from the end of the US Civil War in 1865 all the way up into the mid 1960s. Black folk, black men and black women, were more likely to engage in marital relationships than even their white counterparts were. So I thought that we would follow a path and begin by listening to Charlemagne the God addressing Derek Jackson, and then move our discussion forward, dealing with the idea of Black marriage and actually what has happened with Black marriage. So we'll start off with Charlemagne, and then we'll move on to our presentation.
Breakfast Club, bitches.
Now, I've been called a lot in my 23 years, but Donkey of the Day is a new one.
Well, okay, let me blow my nose. Okay. Listen, Donkey of the Day for Wednesday, March 24th goes to self-love ambassador, entrepreneur, social media relationship expert, Arthur. He's wrote books like Heal Together Without Hurting Each Other. He wrote another book called Single Mothers Are for Grown Men Only. And he even wrote a book called A Cheating Man's Heart, a fiction novel. I put fiction novel in air quotes because based on all these new developments, it's safe to say Derek Jackson's book, A Cheating Man's Heart, was probably based on a true story. Now, Derek has built a following basically calling men out on their behavior, okay, holding men accountable. I'm not mad at that. He's done it to me. He's done it to Little Duval. He's done it to Gilly the King. He's done it to Isaac Hayes III. This is his thing, okay, holding men accountable. And I'm fine with that. I had him on my podcast, Brilliant Idiots, a few years ago. And on that podcast, we promised to hold each other accountable. Well, Derek Jackson, it's your turn to be held accountable. Okay, let's just get right to it. Derek Jackson is full of okay? The what? I can't curse, and you know that. So you say, oh, what? He's full of that, okay? He's a liar, a textbook narcissist and manipulator who gets what he wants at the expense of other people's well-being. This is a guy who will get online and say this about men who have cheated.
I have no sympathy for a man who finds it to be difficult to be faithful after being in a promiscuous lifestyle, and neither should you. Nobody told you to be promiscuous before the relationship, and nobody made you be monogamous with just her. You don't want her? Let another man have her. Simple. But the truth is, you've probably been cheating months before you actually put your dick in her. And more times, I would say 9 times out of 10, when the dude gets caught cheating, that wasn't his very, very first time cheating. That wasn't his only time cheating. That was his only time getting caught.
I agree with you, Derek. Okay. And guess what? Derek Jackson himself is a cheater. Oh, he just got exposed by a woman named Candace. I can't pronounce her last name, but Derek Jackson, who is a married man, brought this woman to Atlanta to stay in his house. He shares with his wife and kids. The woman Candace, who Derek was cheating with, actually took pictures of her laying in the bed he shared with his wife in their Atlanta home. Derek Jackson, who spells his last name Jackson. Why? I don't know. That bothers me. Jackson may be a slave name, but when it comes to black people, it's one of the greatest last names you can ever have. Why would you hack that? I mean, when you're talking Jacksons, you're talking Samuel L., Janet, Jesse, Bo, Randy, Mahalia, and of course, Michael. But actually, I'm glad you don't spell your last name Jackson because you don't deserve to be in that Jackson power ranking, okay? If you were, you would be at the bottom right under Andrew. You know Andrew Jackson, 7th president of the United States, slave master, ethnic cleanser, tyrant. If you actually spelled your last name Jackson correctly, you would be at the bottom of the list near him because of the level of evil that you display. Yes, my brother. See, what we're going to do here today is stop the shenanigans. Okay, see, my father always told me that when you lie, you're not lying to nobody but yourself. And I have watched you since this story broke just lie and attempt to continue to manipulate the public. I mean, that's what you do. You manipulate people. You get online and have these bad faith arguments, which is also textbook narcissism, meaning you don't care about or even try to understand the people that you speak about. You said it yourself. I don't have no sympathy for a man who cheats. Not only do you not care or attempt to understand the people you're talking about, to have any sympathy or empathy, all right? You are dedicated to deliberately misunderstanding and mischaracterizing others to make yourself look good. You like to paint other men as being dishonest and deceptive and morally corrupt. Why? Because you're a narcissist, and that's what narcissists do, project their BS onto other people. The reason you love to paint men as dishonest, deceptive, and morally corrupt is because that's what you are. See, Derek, I waited to give you Donkey because I wanted to see how you would react to all of this, and you reacted by doing what you've been doing all this time, and that's lying. See, I saw the first video you posted when you first addressed the allegations. You said that you and your wife were separated during that time and that you and Candace have had a sexual relationship without actually having sex. Listen.
I'm in screw it mode, F it mode. I'm hitting up old chicks. I really don't care at this point. One of those people was a girl named Candace. Now, here's the thing. So me and Candace have had a sexual relationship without actually having sex.
Fallacies, nonsense, word salad, lies, denying, changing definitions. This is textbook narcissism, people. Lying about what happened, denial, delusion, trying to confuse us to make us doubt the reality of the situation. See, narcissists are often ill-equipped to have mature discussions or resolve conflicts, but in their mind, they are experts at it. Okay, he don't even really understand what he's saying, but in his mind, he's being rational, reasonable, and correct. But the reality is, this nigga just lying. That's why what he's saying don't make no sense, okay? We had a sexual relationship but didn't have sex. That's why it's just an incoherent rant with no logic because it's a lie. Then hours later, Derek Jackson came back online with his wife to admit that he did cheat and that he was unfaithful to his wife. Listen to this guy.
The truth is, and I'm saying it here now, is that Derek Jackson was involved with other women outside the marriage. And by involved, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about just casually kicking it, maybe a lunch or something like that. I'm talking about as serious as sex.
First name, nigga, last name, please. Derek, if nobody else has told you, what you did to your wife was wrong. All right, she had nothing to do with this. She wasn't with you when you was out here cheating with these women, so she shouldn't be with you when you're doing damage control. This story has nothing to do with her. Nothing. And what's sad is you are more concerned about saving your business than you are about saving your marriage. You are more concerned about what we think of you than you are about what your wife thinks of you. Okay? You care more about what we think, you're more concerned about what we think of you than you are about what your wife thinks of you. King, if you're going to use your wife as a human shield, like Nino Brown used that kid as a human shield in New Jack City, at least get her glammed up. Okay? You got her up there looking like she forgot it was a second part to the Busted Challenge. I was waiting for her to drop and come up fresh, but that never happened. And guess what? You don't care. You didn't care about the backlash she could receive. You be on social media all the time. You know how cruel people are. Not only does your wife have to heal from your infidelity now, she has to heal from the bullying that she is currently receiving online. But a narcissist like you don't give a damn because your goal as a narcissist is to dominate and be perceived as right at all costs. Do you know the complex your wife is going to have now? It's impossible to not be impacted by what people say about you online. Ain't enough God and Jesus in the world. You can put on the whole armor of God and God will protect you, but you still gonna feed into what people are saying. And you could have protected your queen from all that because she had nothing to do with it. This is about you and your behavior. If she forgives you, great, but that don't mean drag her out and have her on your arm looking like a damn puppet off Crank Acres and you the chief manipulator controlling all her movements, but that's what narcissists do. They deflect, attack, project. That's why he had his wife there, to deflect. Then he started talking about John Gray because Shade Room asked him a question. You should have just ignored that, but you can't because narcissists love to shift attention from what they are saying and doing. This brother Derek Jackson went so far as to deflect and blame Jesus. Listen.
At that point, I had a beef with God. I gave my life to Christ and my whole life fell apart. My marriage fell apart. At this point, I'm not seeing my kids. And I really honestly just went to a place of effort.
It's the audacity for me. I've never heard a person say, I gave my life to God and now my life is effed up. That's not how that works. Derek, God told me to tell you, stop lying, nigga. Okay, God, Jesus, they don't got nothing to do with your ways. In fact, they told me to remind you that this is nothing but the devil. That's who should be getting the blame here, the devil. And the devil's name is Derek Jackson. You're the liar. You're the manipulator. You're the narcissist. Giving your life to Christ didn't F your life up. You effed your life up because you live in a lie. And you had the nerve to blame God. You did the same thing to Jesus that you did to your wife. Brought Jesus into it for no reason. But the reason you do this is because you never truly have to take responsibility for their toxic behavior. That's what narcissists do. Narcissists do things like this. The only reason he brought Jesus up is because he never truly wants to take responsibility for his bad behavior. Derek, I decided to give you donkey today after what I heard you say last night because it confirmed for me what I already knew. You are a textbook narcissist. Like, you need to be studied. See, gaslighters, narcissists love to speak in the third person. Why? Because it distances them from their actions. Listen to this dude yesterday sitting in the car. Listen.
I hope he understands that all the accountability in the world is not going to rebuild broken trust. Not on a personal level, and even with the public that he's addressing. Like, even his most loyal supporters at this point will probably have a raised eyebrow from this point forward whenever he wants to condemn another man for something like this, and rightfully so. So hopefully he understands that. Nonetheless, I know some people will see this type of video, even though he's come forward and he's been completely honest. Some people are just going to close the book on D. I'm more so on the side of his wife, and just basically letting this be a new chapter of how I see him, because I do believe that his content over the years has helped a tremendous amount of people.
Lord,
you know, he tells the truth, he speaks facts, and quite honestly, I'm gonna be real with y'all, I've needed several new chapters in my own life.
When gaslighters, narcissists feel that not enough people are praising them, they praise themselves. Speaking in third person is a reassurance to the gaslighter narcissist that he is worthy of adoration. Derek, it's just simply time for you to shut the F up forever. Take a break. I know last year with COVID, money probably was tight because you weren't getting booked for speaking engagements to show up to lie to people. And I know you see your business crumbling before your eyes, but King, just go get help. You need to do some real soul searching. You need to do some real therapy, and you need to fix what's wrong with you. Don't get online today trying to project, deflect, and attack anyone else. Prove to us that you are not a narcissist by shutting the hell up. I challenge you to disable all your social media and go away for some months. Vanish. I know as a narcissist you believe that you can talk your way out of this situation, but no. Because see, if you don't stop now, I know where you're going to go from here. What's going to happen is instead of really taking responsibility for your actions, you're going to continue to deflect and start attacking other people. And that's when it's going to get bad for you, because right now it's just Candace. Well, man, oh man, there's so many women that are ready to talk about how you tried to holler at them. And if you don't stop while you're ahead, it's going to get worse. And I know it may feel like it can't get worse, but Derek, it absolutely can. Just go away for a while. I know you got an extremely fragile ego and shaky self-esteem. You're going to be online looking for the handful of people who still stupid enough to support you. You're going to be reposting them and retweeting them to receive more false validation, looking for folks to side with you and tell them that you are right and good and blah, blah, blah. Well, you can prop your wife up. You can deflect and attack others, blame others, act like you're happily married now, and continue to use this situation to promote that book of lies you have on your website with you and your wife on the cover. But since you, the narcissist, like to speak in third person, let's end this with Derek Jackson giving a piece of advice to Derek Jackson. Listen.
Public service announcement. Marriage doesn't make a man marriage material. See, through the media and sometimes firsthand experience, marriage has been marketed as what it could and really should be. A long-lasting, beautiful union, but it's not a magic trick that wipes away a dude's ain't shit ways forever. You can go get the prettiest ribbon you can find and put it on a turd. It's still going to be a piece of shit. Marriage makes you married. Loyalty is what makes you committed.
I agree, Derek. You can put a ribbon on a piece of shit and it's still a piece of, okay? And if you've proved anything to us this week, it's that you, sir, are a piece of. Can you change that? Sure, we all grow, but you have to make a commitment to yourself and not this idea of yourself that you have created online. Please let Remy Ma give Derek Jackson the biggest hee-haw.
Hee-haw, hee-haw.
Okay. Okay, I see Sister Vernell clapping her hands. So just before we move forward, any reaction, any commentary? And once again, I'm less concerned with it being Derek Jackson and more so concerned with the idea of this is a Black husband who has not only cheated on his wife, but also positioned her into a self-advantageous position of having to come forward and not only sit next to him as he explains what he did, But also later she comes forward with her own video speaking about having the whole armor of God on, in that, that this is about spiritual warfare and X, Y, and Z. So any initial commentary about that before we move forward? And welcome to everyone. So
Well, I'll go. I do believe Charlemagne is right about Mr. Jackson being a narcissist. Um, Cheaters have a lot of narcissistic traits. To be able to cheat successfully, if cheating can be successful, uh, you have to be able to lie. You have to be able to justify within your own head uh, your actions. It's never your fault. You're doing it. You've been made to do it, etc. So a lot of what Charlemagne said was, for me, on point. I agree with it. I yield.
I would venture to guess that that's probably a statement you never thought you would ever say, that you agree with everything Charlemagne said. Thank you, Sister DC. Sister
Well,
Burnett.
wait a minute. I didn't say I believed everything he said. I said I agree with his points, and I do. I don't feel one way or the other about Charlemagne. Some of the things he says are outlandish, but in this particular case, he's on target as far as I'm concerned.
All righty. Thank you. Sister Burnell, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Sister DC. Um, Charlemagne is on point in his comments, and I think the biggest thing that I agree with is that even when people, man or woman, do outrageous crap like like Mr. Jackson has done, that there is room for redemption. There is room to grow. And it's especially when you hit rock bottom, they say there's no other direction but up. But there's got to be some honesty and transparency with that. You can't, expect, to grow and learn from when you make horrible decisions if you're not going to own those decisions, and be truthful about it. And this example that we're seeing is what happens when you're not truthful about it. He pretending that you're truthful about it, saying, "Oh, this happened last year. We've, mended. We're together. She's forgiven him. We got a book. I got a book about how we overcame this. This happened last July." And even as he's saying that, like earlier this week, you have the current mistress who he just slept with last Thursday,
Jesus.
a different woman, from the Candace, a different woman, Nikki, who he just slept with for the last time last Thursday, who he hit with a gag order yesterday, you know, um, but it was after she spilled the tea, and so it's like what we're seeing is what happens when someone has made terrible decisions and horrible mistakes. um I don't even want to say mistakes, terrible decisions, but doesn't own them, pretends to be transparent. There's not an opportunity for growth or redemption in that, when they continue to cycle through the same types of behaviors over and over again, and therefore, like putting his wife in the same position once again today that she was probably feeling and was in on Monday, because a new woman has come forward, you know. And then when they talk about the Bible verses and God and stuff like that, as a woman of God, I am tired of this narrative that that Christian women, black women, just need to sign up over and over again, for, to men who are dishonest and disrespectful and have to stay in those situations because that's what the Bible says. It's a terrible, unhealthy, mentally damaging narrative, that I keep seeing over and over again. In this case, John Gray and his wife, I'm tired of that narrative, and I yield.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Anyone else want to jump in on this first opening? Okay, we will go forward then if we don't have anyone wanting to jump in. As I said before, this began out of a conversation that revolved around Derek Jackson and the idea of Black marriage and what the responsibilities are for Black men in protecting Black women, and what tends to occur when they don't protect or cover Black women. Now, having said that, I want to kind of look at some things that are surrounding the history, kind of the history of Black marriages from not only Black men's perspective, but also Black women's perspective. So I'm going to share my screen again for you guys and let me know that you can actually see this. So let's see, yeah. This is the marriage rate of Black men age 15 and older. I want to say, relationships of Black men 15 and older. And you can read it for yourself. When compared with all men, Black men are right on par with all men. When you're talking about divorce, widowed, separated, 1% more than the general average as far as separation. But the numbers become very interesting. And these are 2018 numbers. Only 33% of Black men are married versus 49% of all men. And when you go down necessarily to never married, 52% of Black men have never been married versus 37% of their counterparts. I don't know how I can get this banner to move down or what have you. Let me see if I can. I'll just do it this way. Black marriage in 2017. When you're looking at who Black men married, most probably are shocked to find that 85% of Black men have married a Black wife versus 9% being white, 3% Hispanic, and 3% I guess we could refer to as other, or what some people would term the exoticals. And that there are 479,617 more married Black men than married Black women. Now, when we turn our attention to Black women, who Black women married, 93% of Black women have a Black husband. 4% have married white spouses, 2% Hispanic, and 1% other. Now, this is interesting. I found this very interesting, that Black men were more likely to be married than white men until 1960. Okay, until 1960. And when you look at this spike, because they're 1950, they were more likely to have been married. But once you hit 1960, 70, and 80, you see white men's rate of marriage going up and Black men's rate of non-marriage going up in a 50-year period from approximately 10% to above 25%. And I think it's interesting that the 1960s are that moment of racial integration. We had the Brown decision in 1954. So by 1960 and going forward, we're seeing it actually being implemented. Of course, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that the civil rights movement had two stages. One was equality on the law books of America, and the other one was the exercise or the activation of that equality. So as these things come more into being active, we're seeing more and more, and it's a shocking spike when you really think about it. That in a 60-year period, 7% of Black men were not married. 60 years later, 26, 27% of them are not married. Now, let's look at Black women. Black women were more likely to be married than white women until 1970. And then what occurs? And you can see from this graph a convergence in 1970, where both groups are around 7 to 8% of not being married. And 40 years later, white women are still, they may be 1%, 2 at the most, more likely to be married versus to not be married versus 25% of Black women. So the question before us has to be what happened. And one of the things that I found was quite simply this graph. And it's a kind of a convoluted looking graph, but in actuality, what it really is talking about what happened during what those of us who are of that age remember as the war on drugs. So this is the war on drugs and its effect upon Black marriage in the 1980s and 90s. And you see the same thing. In 1970, you see Nixon declares the war on drugs. And then, of course, from 80 all the way through the 2000s, we have Reagan, we have George H. Bush, the father, and then we're going to have Clinton. In 80 to 2000, that 20-year period, we go from 10% of Black marriages all the way up to 25% of Black men. And Black men are being imprisoned in an unconscionable rate. But probably the most interesting thing is that between the year of 2000 going forward, which would be George W. Bush, the son, and Barack Hussein Obama's arrival, we actually see a slight decrease in the incarceration of Black men. But Black men are still, the rate of them not being married is still escalating. Okay, so we'll go over that again. The idea that Black men, fewer Black men are going to prison, but more of them are still not getting married. So one has to sort of ask themselves this question of what exactly is going on here? Is it the war on drugs that led to a spike in Black men going to prison and therefore the marriage rates falling? But if that is the case, when you would expect that when the incarceration rate fell, that more of them would get married, but the exact opposite is occurring. So just trying to get some feedback and your impression upon that. Is that the reason why Black men and Black women are less likely to be married now? Or are there some cultural factors that we need to really pay attention to? And I really do believe that I always refer to it as kind of like an ecosystem, that there's a natural order of things, of how things are going to operate. And is it possible that the ecosystem of Black male, Black female relationships, especially when you're talking about getting married, making a legal commitment, has been thrown so off kilter? Because you know the dominant narrative that we have, and that narrative is quite simply that there are more Black women than black men. Black men are incarcerated and blah, 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 blah. And so black women have to be very, they have to be very aggressive in regards to the competition that they're dealing with. You know, you've all heard these stories, well, this narrative that is going on. And it has resulted in black men realizing there's that scene in Jungle Fever where they're talking about Flipper, Wesley Snipes' character. And this is that war room scene where the sister says quite simply, well, the ones who got something going on, they know they the SHIT. And so they got a one over here, one over there. You know, they got women all over the place. Um, is it that the ecosystem is just thrown off? Have we passed a point of quote unquote no return in regards to how Black America looks at marriage? Because as I said earlier, that I know quite a few Black men who see no reason in getting married because you know that they said what would be the benefit for me? It's a legal contract, and if it goes south, I'm going to be the one that is going to be losing everything. So let's go ahead and open it up. Sister Vernell, your hand is up. So go right ahead.
Yeah, I think that it was that slide, that last slide that you put up was so interesting because when we were talking to you were talking through the first two, I said I would certainly like to see the graphics on, the number of black men who were sent to prison during this time period of these variation. And the next slide was what you showed, which you know showed that there is a correlation between black men, the percentage of black men who never get married, and the percentage of black men who were incarcerated. It was as if those two lines are running parallel to each other almost, you know. Um, but and so what that means is for those years from 80 to 2000 or even 2010, what that means is that you just had some black men, and I think it would be fair to assume that many of them were fathers who were just missing. They were missing from the home because they were in prison. They were missing from their family. They were missing from their sons and daughters' lives, because they were in prison, just missing. you know and I think that the reason why you don't see, as the number of incarcerated black men kind of dips down a little between 2000 and 2010, and you don't see that same thing happening with the percentage of black men never married. I think it is because of those black men. There are so many who don't have those examples of their father being married and living with and working cooperatively with their mother, or even a stepmother, and seeing that example of what it looks like for a black man to be in the role of full-time devoted father and husband. And so even though that number kind of dips down a little bit, you still have grown men who grew up without seeing those kinds of examples of what black manhood looks like in that arena.
Well, thank you for that. But you're opening up a question that is kind of Pandora's box for me. It raises the question of, do black children, male and female, need to see a married, highly functioning married couple to, number one, be socialized in those roles, number one, and number two, to therefore be able to act out those roles? It's reminding me of, and I don't know why this person's voice or saying popped in my head, and it's actually a bit a bit frightening that it did. Jesse Jackson during his 80s run, where he would go in on these litanies, and he says quite simply, he's talking about Black children and the need to expose them to things. And he says, they got to be able to see it to be it. Can we extrapolate that to the point of relationships? And if we are we kind of setting up, and this is a very crude and unrefined thing to say, that I'm sure is going to affect more than a few of us in here, are people who were not socialized in those roles in those homes a bit unmarriageable then? You get what I'm asking? So the floor is
Yeah,
open.
I get what you're asking, and I'm gonna say yes. I do think children need to see um, married couples functioning as a healthy team. Yes, I do. You know, but if their parents aren't married, does it make them unmarriageable? No, because they can see those examples elsewhere. You know, and in other uh, people in their lives, you know, even if they're not seeing it. But I do think that, and I don't think it necessarily has to do about social being socialized into roles or gender roles, but what it looks like for two people to live together, to be devoted, to share a life together, to make a home run together, to make decisions together, and you know, willingly, lovingly, what that looks like, you know. And I think they do need to see that. But if they don't see that in their home, there could be other examples of that where they can see what that looks like. But I do think that it is helpful to see what it looks like either in their home or with other adults in their lives. And I yield.
I'll put on the camera.
Sister Mary, go right ahead.
I don't know how to put on the thumbs up. I'm sorry, is this not working for me
You,
down there?
you are in the majority with a lot of people here as well. I believe that Vernell and Brother Maurice. I know DC can. Those are the only three that I've seen really do it.
So if the logic is that children who are not seeing successful marriages and successful homes predisposes them to maybe repeating the same behaviors or not being qualified or suitably socialized for positive relationships, I think the argument is true that we are a product of our history and our socialization, right? Well, if we go all the way back to slavery, remember, I'm from the Caribbean, so I may have some different views. Don't shoot me. Maybe I should take my camera back off. If we make that assumption, we can then say that in the very beginning, Black men were never really socialized to be married. Of course, right after slavery, we were getting married and we were trying to have homes that we saw to be represent the ideal. But Black men who were Black men were the studs. They were taken to farms to have multiple babies. They were fed better. They were seen as valuable. And if we're saying that our Black men are not getting married, and historically we are a product of our past, well, then maybe some of what they're doing now with Mr. Derek, it's not so unusual for Black men to have multiple relationships because that's what they did. Forgive me if, I mean, it's not, I can't, I think of where I come from. I grew up understanding all the, my parents are Black, and we lived in a Black neighborhood, but we were comfortable. All the men had extramarital affairs and children, and we understood that. And we call them auntie and uncle. I mean, cousins. We did that. I don't know if the context is different in the States, but I am saying and I am thinking that the history, we have so many things that are vestiges of slavery, how we treat our children. There's so many things. I'm wondering if somehow the psyche of Black men might be, you know, he's the stud, he's the main guy. If somehow that may be germane to what happened way before. And I need to take off my camera before somebody beats me. I yield.
You're not going to be beat here in this arena. You're in safe confines here. We have quite an eclectic crew of thinkers and what have you. But you raise a very interesting question here, and it is quite simply, are by nature Black men, and I'm only dealing with Black men, and I understand that this can be extrapolated to cover all men. Is monogamy not the natural norm for us as men? And is it something that has been quote unquote forced upon us by, and I'm sure Vernell will love this, by Christianity, which many people would say is not our natural religion or worldview or what have you. So let's stick a pin in that one and let the OG step forward and do what it is that he does. And I'm quite sure I see Vernell smiling right now, so please don't let her down.
Okay. I think it's a lot of things. I mean, definitely slavery and the way Black men were treated, or Black people were treated, has a part in that. But also the changing times. I think in the 70s, for instance, you first noticed the divorce rate start going up. People got married in the 50s, and they tend to stay together. But people got married in the 70s, and most of those marriages you start to see a huge uptick in divorce. I think it's across racial lines even. And I do wonder, like, well, as the white society as a whole starts to investigate certain freedoms more, how long before that trickles down to minority groups? Like, I think when gay folks first got the right to marry a few years ago, you started to see rise in divorce. as more mainstream they took on characteristics like, straight marriages. Divorce rates shot up, abuse shot up because they became more public. And you have to wonder, well, is it something about the mainstream relationships that kind of, makes things fall apart? Now, in slavery, you had more secret marriages too. Regardless of what these slaves were put through, they may have been breeding other babies, but yet they had secret marriages and they stayed together in those secret bonds. Lo and behold, here comes freedom, and it tends to fall apart. Maybe there's something there. Maybe it is just monogamy is not the true nature. But just anecdotally, I found that when discussing that with my own male friends, the tendency is, like, for instance, a group of guys, we were all discussing Black and white, talking about open relationships. Every guy, every guy was for it until you asked them, well, what about your woman doing it? They said, no. Every last one of them. But most women said, well, either no up front or they think about it. But every guy said they're down for open relationships except when the woman has the right to do the same thing. And I think that says a lot, white and Black.
I was involved with a conversation at a barbershop, and they were talking about the open relationship thing. And this brother, he was, oh yeah, I'm with it. I'm boom, 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 boom. And one of the other brothers that was in the barbershop, he says to him, he says, man, he said, let me get your number, man. And he said, get my number for what, man? And he said, yo, because I think your woman fine. And so I'm gonna come on through there, and because you talking about doing like a menage a trois or something, I'm down. And that brother was furious, but when you think about it, especially when dealing with what Otis is inserting, the idea of the male mind, when we talk about a menage a trois, it's always in our mind, or usually in our mind, it's what? Two women and one man. Okay. And this brother interjected the idea, like, no, man, let me get your number. I'm gonna come through. And we, and I mean, that brother was ready to fight him in the middle of the barbershop. So yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see that bias right there, brother. Most definitely. Brother Maurice has his hand up. Go right ahead, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Doc. Um, I think more it's a situation of something being planned out over time. When we look at the report on the Negro family that was done back in, I think 65, I think, and they talk about the destruction of the Black family and what needs to be done in order to correct it. But of course, America had no will to correct the destruction of the Black family. And then as we continue to go through time, and you're dealing with the situation of welfare and the man can't be in the home, it sets up barriers and people get used to dealing with each other, just not, quote unquote, married in the sense of going down there and getting something signed. And it becomes a more of a common law marriage versus actual, real marriage. But I know that when I was growing up, our neighbors, Miss Gwen and Mr. Jean, and Mr. Jean used to beat Miss Gwen. And, we'd be outside playing and, we can hear her hollering or whatever. And she never did anything, back. But this one day, I guess she found out he was cheating. And so he was up in the bedroom sleep and us children outside, playing. And we just heard him yell, really, really loud. And, we turned around and we saw her flying out the front door. And so we're like, well, what's going on? And come find out, she found out that he was cheating. So she poured hot grits on his penis while he was sleeping. And so, I remember the conversation, that the adults were having were like, well, there's a lot of things that we can put up with, but that's just something we're not going to put up with. You just don't do that. You can do all these other, but that you're not going to do, and you're not going to get away with it. So, for me, in my mind as a child, then I'm thinking, okay, well, wow, he did that, and it calls for the ambulance to come and pick him up. So that was like one of those things that that's a no-no. And it makes a situation of, people just getting used to just being together and occasionally having your slip-offs so that way there's no repercussion. Because you can break up, at this minute, go do what you got to do, then come back and say, let's get back together. And it's all cool because it was done during the breakup and not while the two were actually together. So I think a lot of that has come about social engineering. I really do. And I rest my mic.
James, you're muted if you were talking.
Sister Regina, go ahead.
Good evening. So, a couple of things. Good evening, everyone. A couple of things that come to mind for me. First, the fact that 85% of Black men who are married to Black women. And so I've heard that statistic before, and I think we don't spend enough time on that. 85% of Black men who are married to Black women. And that's not a failure, and I think we just tend to kind of gloss over that and focus on who's not married, and I think there's a host of cultural, pop cultural reasons, contemporary reasons, the fact that homosexuality is more accepted now. So perhaps people don't feel a motivation to get married, like they did before, because they're not like pretending that the population that would once pretend to be in a heterosexual marriage now doesn't have that same societal pressure. Young people who are the children and now grandchildren of divorce, that have never seen a marriage and just don't have the same, don't feel as compelled to like, yes, I have to be married. But Brother Maurice made a point that I think that we don't talk about a lot. So the intersection of marriage and class. And Black people, we don't spend a lot of time about that, because the reality of it is it's cheaper to be married. It is so much cheaper to be married. So in there's so many benefits, the tax benefits, the credit of that becomes available to you. It is financially better to be married, aside from the love and all that, but and we don't talk about that enough as a community. And I wonder if that is really based more in class than anything else, and having that real understanding of, if you get married in your 20s, your late 20s, and do some decent family planning, the two of y'all got some decent jobs, you can make something happen for your life. You can begin, you don't have to be poor, you don't have to struggle. And so I just wanted to bring that point to the surface too, to think, so we can think a little more, maybe talk some more. I would love to hear other ideas about how marriage and class maybe keep us from the idea of marriage.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point when you're talking about the impact and the effect that class has, because there are and this ironically is a part of the earlier conversation I was talking about that led me to want to talk about this tonight. The person asked me, so who's listening to these people? And I'm like, people who don't have anyone in their family who's been married for 20, 30, 40 years. So they have no other source to go to. So they go listen to a Derek Jackson. They go listen to a Kevin Samuels. And in many ways, they begin to behave as if they're tabula rasa, as if they're blank slates. And whatever these so-called gurus say, that becomes the gospel, and they begin to govern their decisions and what have you about that. Um, I don't think that people who come from what could best be termed marriage families, where the grandparents were married, maybe the parents and some aunts and uncles were married. I don't know if they really understand that there are some families where no one has ever been married. And now how you address that cycle, um, I don't know, because it's almost as if the ball gets rolling and it turns into a self-perpetuating cycle of people who just don't get married. It's not what we do. So I believe class does have a major factor in it, especially when you consider, as Regina's talking about, the financial benefits of actually being married. Well, everyone that has struggled, um, even maybe an aunt or an uncle who got married, you don't recognize those benefits because life has been and always, from their worldview, will be difficult and hard on them. And I yield.
Well, I think another piece that we've kind of touched on a little bit too. Um, OG talked about this a little bit, is and it's like feminism. And so I think it within the Black community, one, we have to recognize that women have always worked, and there has always been a time when Black families were not always physically together. So I think we can't just always go to that, like, oh, absenteeism, and that's the reason. But think about the times when the men, there may have been a marriage, but the men worked in the next state or a few states over, and sent money back. So I think the physical presence has always been there. Women working has always been there. But I think what is fairly new, just a few generations old, 2 or 3, is this women's liberty, and women's mobility and social acceptance. So women could be free, yes, but there was a stigma, you know. So certainly my mom was divorced in the 70s, like so many other Americans. Like I'm certainly in that generation. Um, and so I remember that, yes, there was a bit of a stigma, but now, no, get a baby's dad. You ain't got to get married. You know what I'm saying? It's like a complete flip reverse. And I can see that difference. Like there was a bit of a stigma when I was younger, as a younger single mom, and the way I would interact with the world, the way, the blocks that people would put up, the judgment, etc. And now there's a shift. Like it doesn't matter. Like, oh, you got a baby, that's cool. It's not an expectation. There's no social stigma. So that part attached to motherhood, but also there's not a stigma attached to women just being independent. So women are now more educated. Women are now more, earning more. So they don't need to be with the man. They don't need a man for physical protection. They don't need a man for sustenance. They have financial mobility and they have career mobility as well. So I think that's a piece that plays into that. And it's not always like, it's like I have to stand up for women. It's not like men hold all the power here and they like, we ain't marrying y'all. It goes both ways. Women have some say in it as well, I think. And I don't want to overlook that.
Thank you for that.
And also one more thing to add into that pot too is because we also had a lot of our people, babies having babies, and this out of that created culture again, making it normal to not be married, and you have babies having babies, so everybody's young, and grandma who's supposed to be grandma now, she's like, I'm not grandma yet, I still got all this. So there's a lot of tearing down to the majority of our people. There's a lot of tearing down and not enough building that same segment up. And so when we look at that, those problems still persist. And it gets to the point where marriage, as it was said, is not a main thing. It's not something that they look to say, yeah, this is what I should be, or this is what, we have to be. They go along with what the new culture is, what the new thing is. And unfortunately, that's having a very disastrous effect on us as a people. And I rest my mind.
I used to, and the people in Columbus would probably, I'm not sure if you ever come across this organization. I used to work for a place called Columbus Works. Um, and for some reason, I remember this exchange that I had with one of the classes that I was leading there. And they were trying to figure out things about me, and they were asking these questions. And I believe I might have I'm not even sure if I was in grad yet. I might have still been an undergrad working there. And ironically, when Damon Thomas, when he reappears here, ask him about Columbus Works, because that's how I got the job. He ended up having to leave. But they were asking me if I had children, if I had any kids. And my comment to them was, no, I've never been married. And their response was, you don't have to be married to have kids. And I said to them, well, I was raised that you do. And I've always remembered that, because I wonder how many of them was that the first time they'd heard that? Or was it such a foreign concept to them that what I consider to be normal is an aberration to them? And their normal everyday movements and what have you are aberrant to me.
Yes.
So it takes you back to the idea. Andrew Hacker did that great study where he's talking about two nations, black and white, separate and unequal. I think that within Black America, you have something similar to that, you know, and I don't believe that it's just two nations. I believe that it's multiple nations that cut across geography, socioeconomic status, educational level, and all of these other things. And the idea of marriage is a part of that. That there are some people who are not viewing marriage as necessary. They're viewing it as simply a piece of paper or a document and what have you, and are paying no never mind to it at all. And I yield.
James, I just want to say that I have had this similar question, even now, 2021. Why don't I have children? I mean, I have a job where I counsel parents, where I coach parents, you know, to be more involved in their education, to set goals for their families. And I get that question all of the time. Well, Vernell, why don't you have children? And I give the same response that you gave. Well, I've never been married. And people always say, well, what does that have to do with it? Like that is always, what does that have to do with it? Or some variation of that same statement, you know? And I say, well, for me, I never wanted to be a single mother. When I envision myself, if I have ever envisioned myself being a mom, it has always been having somebody in the house full time, helping me get the job done, and in my own history, no one gets married with the goal of getting divorced. My parents got divorced, and my mom was a single mom, and I was very much aware of how hard and difficult it was for her when she didn't plan that. I'm not signing up for that. You know what I'm saying? Like as a goal. And that, and that's why, and then I tell people children are expensive. I can't afford that by myself. I need another income, another salary, another person to go half on this baby. Like I can't do that by myself. Like I mean, and I firmly believe that living in a world where, I'm still going to get paid less than a man with similar education and experience, I'm still going to get less paid. I'm still going to get paid less, whether or not I purposefully take on the responsibility of raising a child by myself with my sole income. That to me is also a financial decision, you know, and one that will greatly affect my standard of living. And as a woman, I'm not willing to make that financial gamble. I know that probably sounds horrible, in the balance of how beautiful and wonderful children are. But I mean, you know, growing up poor, I can't sign up purposefully to, to take that on. I can't afford it.
All right, Sister Mary, you had your hand up.
You're
Yeah,
muted,
definitely mute
Sister
your mic.
Mary.
I'm really struggling to it's like I live in these two bodies. So I've lived in the United States for 25 years, 30, who knows? But yet I'm very much Caribbean. And I'm trying to bring these two realities together. And I will say this in the form of a question. because I don't know what the context is here very much. The context that I understand is I was married here for a while. I'm now divorced. I don't know a lot of the historical perspective. So what I will say is I grew up, I left when I was 16, where the more successful families were, they got married. That same idea of intersectionality of um, race and class. So the more successful Blacks they married. And then those that were not as educated, they had children. They didn't get married. The women were quite comfortable not having children, not being married, and had many baby daddies. And yet somehow it looks like I'm seeing that now, baby daddies kind of thing. I don't know if that's a relic of, if that's a reflection of class, or if it's a reflection of the baby daddy drama from slavery. I don't know if our getting married and saying we understand, yes, it's our Christian perspective and background, but I don't know if it also had to do with our understanding of the white relationship and our attempt to mirror that. So before civil rights, we became more successful. We had our families and our homes. And please forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm having this V.S. Naipaul talks about it being two bodies. So I'm struggling with really trying to understand the context that I now live in with my own certain perspectives. And somehow I am mired in an understanding that a lot of the men in my culture that I grew up in behaved like the studs on a plantation. And they do that, even if they went into another class, they still had that mentality that the men will be men, and they still did that, but they maintained their families. They did like the white men did. They kept their wives, they took care of their children, but they had babies with the slave woman, right? So I don't know if maybe I can't isolate the variables. I don't know if what we see in our homes and our families, I refuse to accept, I'm challenged to accept that it's totally devoid of our influence of slavery. I don't know enough, and I do know that a lot of what we do as Black people, how we treat our children, I know a lot of what we do are echoes, how we speak in our homes, our verve, a lot of what we do, we are products of slavery. So I don't know if the sexuality of Black men and how our homes operate is totally separate from what we've been through. I do recognize that we marry. I don't know if my desire or my choice to have been married is partly a result of my Christianity, yes, but is it not also that which I thought to be the ideal, and we did that? I don't know if I'm clear. It's very difficult for me to articulate because, as I said, I live in these two bodies. So I don't know maybe enough about hair to make a comment, but I am challenged with trying to understand what are the roots of what we now see. And I don't think it's just purely Christianity that taught us to get married. Sorry, I yield.
All right. I'm not sure if Regina unmuted her mic on purpose or not have you, but we had Vernell and then we have our brother Otis as well with their hands up. So um, whoever wants to step forward, please do.
Regina, did you unmute because you wanted to speak?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I think that for me, yes, I think it's more about class. I think people of all cultures, of all groups, have been cheating for all time. People have always had side relationships. That's not anything new. And yes, we do have residual slave, the impact of slavery. Yes, that's true. But I also want to remind us that our history predates slavery by thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so that's just a blip. And so that ancestral memory and residue still exists. So I just want to put that out there. But for me, I think it really does come back to the class, because when you have assets to protect, then you're thinking strategically about partnership. And I think to your point that, lower class people just have babies and successful people get married. That's because they have assets to protect. They have a financial legacy to pass on. And so I think that comes back, that's directly tied to class, and that's all. I just wanted to put that out
Regina, that is that's good stuff right there. I'm glad you shared that. Um, Slightly related to what I wanted to say, I so much like resist this thought that Black men are incapable of being in a monogamous relationship, that Black men are incapable of being faithful to one woman. It's just not in their nature, because of whatever, because of a residual from slavery, because of the father wasn't in the home, their father wasn't in the home, whatever, reason that it is. I reject that, because what it says is that when you boil it all down, Black men are defined by their penises. When you have that kind of mentality, or you subscribe to that that Black men cannot make a decision about the kind of life and lifestyle that he wants to build for himself and his family, and then is unable to maintain it because of what is going on in his pants. And that therefore Black men can't think, they cannot process the concept of actions and consequences, that they can't perform higher level thinking, like that is what those ideas are saying about Black men, you know. And so I completely reject, anything that suggests that. And when I hear Black men say, "Oh, I'm incapable of being faithful to one woman," or she should have known I would have cheated, like, what are you saying about yourself, you know? And so I just reject it. I think Black men are much more magnificent and capable and wonderful and intelligent and able to be completely defined by what's going on in their pants. And so I'm going to yield with that.
Sister Mary, jump in. Get on mute your mic.
I said just that, Sister Vernell, to a man that I know who is of this opinion that a man will be a man, and this is what men do, especially Black men. And I said, so you're only as good as what's in your pants? What happens when that works no longer? What happens to you? What happens to you? Do you cease to exist? Should we just take you and just, put you off? But my thought is that somehow Black men were known for just being the stars. They just made babies, right? They take you and send you to different farms. And somehow I am wondering if somehow that twisted thing, because I keep saying I love, and I couldn't imagine, God forgive myself, being with anybody else but a Black man. But I think a number has been done on their own psyche. They don't understand their worth. And I agree with you 100%, because I said to someone just a few days ago, so what happens to you when it stops working? Are you finished? And he felt like he was devastated, like, what will I do with myself? So I agree with you very much on that. That's not how we define our men or anyone. I yield.
Okay, we've been here often enough that we all know the rules. So, Brother Otis, hold on for 1 second. Brother Maurice, take us out. We go for 90 minutes, and then if you want to stay overtime, that is a untaped session. Right
Yes,
here,
sir,
brother.
Doc. Thank you. Excellent program. Thank everybody for coming. But as we always say, you kill the nigga in you, I'm gonna kill the nigga in me, and our God will reign supreme. We are Black First, today, tomorrow, and forever. Love you, family. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
Peace, my brother.